Good morning, Justice Seekers. I want to explain myself. I'm not going to be able to do a live stream today. I don't know why it worked yesterday, but as I had mentioned, I got my brand new laptop all good and ready to go. The Samsung, what is it called? It is a something Pro. Ugh, Galaxy Book Pro. So for those of you that are more familiar with laptops than I am, it's a Galaxy Book Pro Samsung, brand new, top of the line. It's awesome. But getting familiar with it's another story. So I had to make a request to start streaming, and it said it takes 24 hours to get that response. So hopefully I'll be live streaming tomorrow. Mm. But in the meantime, I'll just kind of pretend that I'm live streaming and thank you for joining me. Everything that I say is my opinion only, purely for the sake of conversation, open discussion, and hopefully it's educational and entertaining. So I really appreciate you guys. This has just been a phenomenal thing to figure out the YouTube, and I'm just amazed with how well it's working so far. I knew switching computers was going to be a setback, but hopefully I'll have it all mastered in a day or two. So I have some notes here. Oh, some things I've been thinking about. Um, One of the thumbnails that I used yesterday for a video from a couple of days ago that is called Autopsy Results. I put a photograph of Kiely Rodni. The photograph is taken out in the snow. I think it's the back of a school bus, and it says Lost Trail on the school bus, but I cropped it out so it's just her face. And she looks really sad. I mean, I kind of picked a sad photo since it was her autopsy. Um, but, it struck me last night, or maybe even this morning, kind of the gravity of the situation. Here she is at the Lost Trail Lodge, living out 4 miles away from probably even a neighbor, and homeschooling. And she looks a little bit older than 7 in the picture, so I'm going to guess maybe 8 years old, maybe 9. I'm pretty good gauging since I have 4 kids, and my youngest is almost 11 right now. So she looks like she's about 8 or 9, maybe. She's definitely not 7 anymore in that photograph. So maybe they've lived out there for a year or two, and her little baby brother's been born. And I love babies, and babies are amazing. We've all been babies, right? But they are hard work, and they take a lot of attention. So I had mentioned that before, how when she was 8 or 9, it probably got a little bit more stressful for her out there at the lodge, with her parents having to take care of the little bambino, and she probably helped with that too. However, she probably didn't have a lot of friends, and I wondered if she had gone to school before they moved there to the Lost Trail Lodge, like maybe preschool, kindergarten, first grade. I don't know. I don't know the story going back that far, but my guess is that she probably did at least one of those things at some point in time, and that as a say, let's say an 8.5, 9-year old on that school bus in that picture, that she knows she's homeschooling, she knows she's isolated, and here she is on a school bus that's not going anywhere. It's just, it's not taking her to school. It's not picking her up and taking her to school where all your friends are, right? I mean, it's rough. It's a lifestyle decision that a lot of people make, not so much in the lower 48, but when you go up to Alaska, there's a lot of kids that are living like that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it is isolating, and it has its challenges. It's basically homesteading, right? So it's kind of like living more the way things were a long time ago, as opposed to cutting edge modern technologies and conveniences. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, because I think they both have their pros and their cons. What I'm saying is, how much my heart breaks for Kiely Rodni that she has passed away at the tender age of 16, and how much my heart breaks for her that she had a lot of challenges from the time she was 7 until she was 16, living out there. I'm sure it's gorgeous, absolutely beautiful, but everything has its challenges. Also, living in a bed and breakfast type of situation, it'd be really hard to keep everything spotless, especially with little kids. It's hard enough to keep up with that stuff when you're not having your home be your business. So that's one thing that I've thought about on occasion and have not mentioned yet in a video. Um, so let's just get into it. A few of these things, I'm just devastated that so many folks are moving on from Kiely Rodni. I understand, and a lot of channels cover a lot of cases, and there are many, many absolutely worthy cases that need covering. Um, I just don't feel like hers is anywhere close to done, and I don't feel like she has gotten justice. And my fear is that without people pushing hard, that she won't get justice. I'm sure most everybody knows that once a case is closed, it's not very common for a case to get reopened. So whatever disposition the case is closed with can change, but it's unlikely to change. Um, and part of her case has been closed, the investigation with, I guess, with Nevada County. However, allegedly, there's still the California Highway Patrol report, and there's potentially an FBI report that those are not complete. So those investigations are still remaining open, allegedly, supposedly. Um, so, what can we do? Can we inundate them with emails and phone calls and ask them to look more seriously at this case? Because it's obvious that there's so much wrongdoing. There's obviously, that autopsy report is bizarre. The most significant thing to hang your hat on, I believe, is the weight of all of her organs and the weight of her body, and comparing those weights to what normal weights are. And if there's an explanation, like she was splayed out and dehydrated and drained, I mean, it's gross, but you know, where's that explanation in the report? Um, Another uh, possible issue to hang your hat on as far as this being bogus is that necklace. That that necklace that they said keep your eyes out for that necklace early in her missing persons case. I believe I've looked at the photos again and again, but I believe the way they described it too, I'll go back and watch some of those videos, is that it was a single chain that then cascaded down into 3 chains, right? We've seen photographs of Kiely in that necklace. And the way the report is written, there's 3 separate necklaces that they say are yellow. And to me, that's just bizarre. Gold tone is what you would call it with jewelry. Um, to say that they're yellow is almost like they're just trying to say she's wearing like trash jewelry, like yellow chains. I don't know. I think it's really odd. Um, but also, perhaps if that necklace that she always wore was missing, perhaps somebody replaced it with 3 chains, thinking that it was 3 chains, 3 separate necklaces. It's just an idea. I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm saying that it's very curious that the report is written as though there's 3 separate necklaces. It states it very clearly. It doesn't say anything about them being connected as one necklace. And I'm pretty sure her necklace was one necklace that had 3 chains hanging from it. Mm. Anyway, so those are the points for people to look at if they're going to try to say that this autopsy report's bogus and needs to be overridden by a higher authority, U.S. Marshals, FBI. Um, even the Attorney General's office for the state. So, um, let's see, what else did I want to talk about in this tape? Um, you know, the catfish crew, as I've been calling the naysayers and the folks that come on to some of the chats and try to mess things up, try to shut down the YouTubers that want to focus on Kiely's case. Um, some of them make threats. Some of those threats are thinly veiled, some of them not so thinly veiled. But making threats is illegal. So if you're a creator and you have any of those threats, or you're a subscriber and a viewer, and you see some of these threats in people's comment sections, either during the lives or later, screenshot them and send them in, because no one is allowed to threaten anybody with physical harm in our country. That's a law. So I know a lot of creators have gotten threats, and I've seen it before with other cases. The Barry Morphew case was one that I called it the Barry Morphew army, that would come out in full force, just swinging. And then they all agree with each other to really put a person on the spot and try to make them feel foolish. But it's just trolls. Trolls, catfish crew, whatever you want to call it. Um, and justice delayed is justice denied. That's kind of a famous cliche saying, but it's true. Um, Gabby Petito's family is still fighting for justice in her case, and I sure hope that they can get it. They have filed a lawsuit against the Laundrie family, saying that the Laundries withheld information that was damaging to their family. And I believe it's true, and I'm glad that the court case is holding up so far. Um, a couple of cases that I have not mentioned that I'd like to mention, where justice has been denied or delayed, hopefully just delayed, but certainly denied so far. There's a kid that was living up in upstate New York. His name is Garrett Phillips. I think he was 12 when he was murdered in his mother's apartment. Um, and there is a Netflix movie, I think, called Who Murdered Garrett Phillips? And it's excellent. It is so good and so frightening. I'll do a quick recap of the theme. Is that his mother had dated a law enforcement officer for about a year, not just dated, but lived with. And then she moved into her own apartment. She had maybe been cheating on him with a black gentleman, a soccer coach. His first name, I think, was Nick, another Nick. There's a lot of them in true crime. Anyway, they tried to pin the homicide on Nick, and they tried to make it look like it was, out of a broken heart, like she had dumped him, not knowing that even though she had been living with Nick after she dumped the law enforcement boyfriend, that they were in a small town that was racist, and they made it look like they split up. They moved into separate apartments, but they weren't split up. It was an intentional way to try to take the heat off of the racism uh, in that community. So, Who Killed Garrett Phillips is a really good movie, and it's true life. I think it happened in 2011, 2012, and justice still has not been completed as far as I know. Kendrick Johnson is another kid who was murdered at school during school hours in the gym. I want to say it was in Mississippi. And I learned about his case on Christina Randall. And shout out to Christina Randall. She's one of the leading YouTube true crime folks. And she does a great job covering cases. So Kendrick Johnson is also a black child who the family has not had justice. The case is very racially motivated and sexually motivated too. It looks like, if you watch Christina Randall's YouTube uh, podcast about it, you'll learn more. But it looks like Kendrick might have had a thing for a white girl whose boyfriend's dad was FBI, and Kendrick was murdered, obviously, at school during school hours in the gym. And because of their connections, there's been no justice. And they said it was an accident. Sound familiar? It was an accident in the gym. And there are video camera surveillance systems everywhere in that school because it's a big high school. And oddly enough, the camera in that one corner was broken down during the accident. So, these tricks that these people are trying to play in Kiely Rodni's case, they're old tricks. They've been done before. I swear, people that are corrupt think that they are inventing corruption, like they're inventing the wheel, and like no one's ever seen it before. No one's gonna be none the wiser, right? Shanann Watts is um, the Watts case, quadruple homicide, is a case from 4 years ago in Colorado where the pregnant mother and the two toddler children were all gruesomely snuffed out on, what was it, an August 13th, I think. It was a Sunday night, Monday morning, and Chris Watts, the husband, confessed to everything. In his words, he confessed that he did the murders. Like, again, the language isn't even right. And if you are familiar with that case, you know that they use a lot of odd phrasing, and they say the word like a lot. Chris Watts and his mistress, Nicole Kessinger. One of the best series on the Watts case, if you're interested in it and want to get caught up, or if you're interested in it and you're caught up and you haven't seen The Unmasking, is the name of the channel. Unmasking NK is like an 8 or 9 part series that's phenomenal. NK's Nicole Kessinger, who looks like she had everything to do with the quadruple homicide and basically got off scot free as much as you can when everybody suspects you and you're going to have to change your name and get plastic surgery and go into witness protection. But she was definitely protected by the law. And there were connections with the law, there were connections with billion-dollar industries with Anadarko, the oil company that they worked for, that both Chris Watts and Nicole Kessinger worked for at the time of the murders. So Anadarko's not a company anymore. They were in the middle of a merger, and it was a multi-billion-dollar merger, and the price dropped in those days from the time that the family was missing until a few days later when Chris confessed and they recovered the bodies. So the merger went through, but Anadarko lost a bunch of money because of this, but they would have lost a lot more if it was two of their employees, not just one of their employees gone bad. And it could be more. I mean, it's a really interesting case if you're not familiar with it. Shanann Watts deserves the justice. Shanann Watts's children, Nico was the baby that she was pregnant with. Cece was the 3-year-old. Bella was the 4-year-old. And, it's a heartbreaking case. And it's heartbreaking, especially because there's still no real justice. Chris Watts definitely needs to be in jail for the rest of his life. And, really, I think he deserves the death penalty, but that's a whole nother issue. But anybody else that was involved has not had any charges. So anybody else who was involved needs to get due process, in my opinion. Anyway, the Suzanne Morphew case, that's another heartbreaking one, that the husband was arrested a year after she disappeared, and then he was released a few months ago, and um, they still haven't found her body. And that was sort of what they were alluding to when they released him from prison, was that they wanted to start the case over with a body, and hopefully they'll get somewhere with that. Again, there's a lot of evidence in the Suzanne Morphew disappearance. And these fools that commit these murders um, are the killers are usually their own worst enemy. They're the ones that, first of all, they shouldn't be killing people. Am I right? That would solve their problem right there if they just would do better and not kill people. But, of course, they can't undo the tragic, disgusting crimes that they have done. But Suzanne Morphew's widowed husband, Barry Morphew, he said and did a lot of weird things from the outset that the authorities pretty much knew he was guilty immediately. And I'll tell you, one of those things was that, if you're familiar with the case, it was on Mother's Day. He says that he was in, I think it's Brittner, a town like 3 hours away near Denver, that he was redoing a retainer wall from the year before that his company had done for the city, and that it was done poorly. But that city doesn't allow anybody to do work on their contracts on Sundays. So that's one way that they know he's lying, but there's like a million other ways. But what I wanted to share was something that the police knew immediately that the public did not know for a long time, was that when he got to um, back to the town and was connected up with law enforcement, who said that they discovered her bike not far from the house, but down in a ravine. And this is like a $3,000 or $5,000 mountain bike. I think it's like a road racing mountain bike that was top notch, like as expensive as a car. It might have even been $10,000 or more, like something I'm not familiar with. Um, but a really nice bike that was just kind of like placed at the bottom of the ravine. There was no like broken branches or anything. It was just like sitting there upside down. Um, and when Barry Morphew arrived to that site on the road, and law enforcement was there, and they pointed to the bike, and he started acting like this, saying, "Oh my God, is that where she was?" And at that point in time, they're just dealing with a missing persons case. And he was overplaying it. They knew immediately he was lying. He was pretty much never let into his house again. They took him to his house over the next couple of hours to go into the house supervised with law enforcement on body cam, and to retrieve some of her clothing so that they could have the dogs smell the clothing to try to find her. And um, you know this case again, so a lot of these cases are all about the money. There, sex is involved, money is involved. um, Suzanne Morphew was an heiress of her dad, maybe her granddad, I think her dad, who started a root beer company in Indiana that was kind of like A&W root beer with the food service too. So not just the root beer. He had that, but he also had the restaurants, a franchise. So a lot of money. So Suzanne Morphew's husband um, met her when they were teenagers, and he was a caddy on the golf course at the country club that her family owned. So that's how they first met. Anyway, I don't want to keep going with too much information there. My point is that the marriage was on the rocks. She was an heiress. She wanted out of the marriage. He was very abusive. Um, and, it's an unresolved case. So, that's just a half a dozen right there of unresolved cases that, yeah, I could talk about those too, but I'm going to try to remain focused on Kiely Rodni. I'm going to just personally be reviewing a lot. Um, the truth is in the numbers, like the numbers of what the weight is of Kiely Rodni's organs compared to what they should be. And the devil is in the details. The truth is also in the numbers of the electronic data, like um, what time these texts and phone calls were made, and what the people say versus what the uh, the metadata says. Um, we've also mentioned Sean Dougherty, I think is his name, this 12-year-old boy that was killed in March, and it looks like his friends might have murdered him. I could be saying the name wrong, like the wrong name with the case, because, like I said yesterday, I really have a hard time focusing on cases where children have been harmed like that. It's so abhorrent. I avoided that Watts case successfully, I think, for the first 3 years, basically. You know, it was all over the media. And I was just like, not looking, not listening. I can't. I just can't. Those kids are so cute. And then I got sucked into it. And, it's a very um, sad situation. And thank goodness for channels like Unmasked or Unmasking. I think it's Unmasked. Um, is the channel, and Unmasking NK is the series that I was referring to. Watts the Obsession, Armchair Detective, those three channels and a handful of others are like hyper focused on that Watts case, and they are sworn that they're going to stay hyper focused on it until there's justice. And I'm so grateful for people that are doing that, fighting for Shanann and her daughters. Um, so then there's the little baby boy, Quentin. There's Summer Wells. Um, there's John Benet Ramsey, for crying out loud. That was 20 years ago or more now. Um, Still hasn't gotten justice. Obviously, people are being protected, right? Um, let's see. In Kiely Rodni's case, we have the full destruction of her remains before the date rape drug was tested for in the toxicology. Um, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. I mean, the date rape drug would be the first thing you would test for, I would think, in a situation like that. Especially when it comes back with very little alcohol and there are eyewitness accounts saying that she was stumbling around, unable to walk, unable to talk. I mean, come on. Although, like I've said a few times, it could be that she had a concussion from the friendly fight and that was why she was stumbling around. But, the brain, they said in the autopsy, was too decayed to look at. Really? That doesn't add up. Um, but going back to that quote that Lindsay had said, these teenagers are our future. I think she's talking for herself. If she supports the truth coming out, these teenagers would get in trouble and she would be left out in the cold in that Truckee community. And she needs to protect those teenagers for her future, is what I think. I think that Lindsay, and I've brought this up once or twice before, a lot of creators have, her weaponizing kindness and honor is, again, so abhorrent. How on earth can you think that weaponizing something like kindness and something like honor is honorable? That makes no sense at all. So she was really trying to humiliate anybody that would uh, talk about her daughter's death. And I believe that her daughter would be wanting people to talk about her death. Her daughter does not want to be forgotten. Nobody wants to be forgotten, right? In the afterlife. So, with the future of Kylie's mother, financial future and prosperity and business future, I'm just gonna say it. Who the hell's gonna want to stay in a lodge with this history? I mean, it's like it's haunted, and you've got questionable characters running the place out in the middle of the woods, and your Wi-Fi is not really going to work too well. Your cell phone's not going to work too well. Um, it's really batshit crazy. I'll just say it. People do crazy shit when they get themselves into deep financial trouble, and or when they're in love triangles. And this situation with Kiely and her ex-boyfriend and her friends or ex-friends or frenemies, as I often call them, um, you know, those types of relationships is often the root of a crime, like a homicide. People go nuts. People can't deal with the rejection. They can't deal with being made a fool of. Um, Women fear more than anything else getting killed by a serial killer. This is kind of statistically that's what women fear. They fear, especially getting tricked by a serial killer as a romantic partner. So women fear domestic violence, basically. You want to know what men fear statistically more than anything? They fear being made a joke of. They fear being laughed at. So, you look at these people in all these cases that I've mentioned, and you look at the men that might be the perps, the men who might be the fools, the laughing stock. Um, People will do anything to prevent that type of embarrassment. So, you know, um, blackmailing is illegal as threatening is illegal. And I just wonder if Lindsay hasn't been essentially blackmailed by the community, essentially blackmailed by Sammy. Um, and I want to say that when you're in a situation where there's drug dealing, um, when you're in a situation where there's big drug deals going on, you don't really have an option of whether you're going to be involved or not. If you know about it, you're involved. So, you can either go with the flow, or you don't really have an alternative. Your alternative is very likely death. So it's just something to think about in this situation. Um, I wanted to mention one more thing, and then I'll wrap this one up. Well, another thing about the three necklaces that I have mentioned, I don't know if I've ever heard any other creator mention it. In the autopsy, that colorless stone, like, did the person writing the report forget the word for clear? Transparent. Um, Colorless could be opaque still. It could be white, it could be black, it could be beige. Colorless is not a description of anything. If it's a clear stone, then say it's a clear stone. If it's a translucent or transparent stone, say that. But colorless stone is just such a strange descriptor. There is something dangling off of one of Kiely's necklaces on that three-stranded necklace that she liked so much, that was such a big deal early in the case. There, on the second strand, there is something that looks like it's maybe glass or crystal. It looks like it's crystal clear. So, again, why would anybody say a colorless stone? Really? I mean, I know it's kind of silly to focus on that, but it's also, you need to be precise with these things. You don't have a margin for error. You need to be precise. It's extremely important. Um, so what I wanted to mention before I wrap up this video is about when I got my first public records request. I did that in person. I don't think I've shared that story with you guys. I'm going to share it real quick and then wrap this one up. But, I had been briefed on my rights to go and make this request, and it was for an autopsy. And I walked into the coroner's office and I said, hello, I'd like to request this autopsy report. And the person, the receptionist at the counter said, "Are you family?" I might have told you guys this story. And I said no. And she said, "Are you a journalist? Are you with the media?" And I said, "No." Long, awkward silence. Again, I'd been briefed on my rights, so I knew that she was not allowed to ask me who I was. She wasn't allowed to ask for ID. She wasn't allowed to ask for my name. And I knew that I had the right to gain access to a copy of that report. So after the long, awkward silence, she said, "Okay, um, well, you have to pay cash. There's a fee for that, and it's charged by the page." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "You have to have exact change. We won't take a check or a credit card." And I said, "Well, how much is it?" And she said, "It's 25 cents a page." And I asked, "Well, how many pages is it?" And she said, "7." And I said, "Well, I think I have the exact change, and if I don't, you're welcome to keep the quarter." And she went and got the report and made a Xerox copy of it, handed it to me. And, mind you, that there's like a deputy sheriff sitting behind her the whole time. And, she's kind of performing for that employee, making sure that she's being difficult and pretending that, she's going to protect that information and not just distribute it the way she's supposed to distribute it legally. Transparency is the law. So it's a public record. And so, she handed me the 7 pages, and I handed her the $1.75. So funny. And then she like slid a clipboard over to me. I think I did tell this story, just not in such detail. So she slid the clipboard across the counter and she said, "Sign your name, please." Or I don't even think she said please. She just said, "Sign your name." And I think she stated it like, "You need to sign," or something. Like she made it as if I was required to. And I knew that I wasn't. And I picked up the pen and I thought, I could just write Mickey Mouse, but I had nothing to hide, so I just signed it. And that was that. That's the whole story. Um, it blew my mind though. If I had not been briefed on my rights when she started with the part of "Are you family?" I would have said no, and I would have been a little embarrassed, and I would have started to think I don't have the right to ask for it. And especially when she followed up with, "Are you a journalist with a news media source?" And I said, "No." I not known my rights, I probably would have like backpedaled and said, "Oh, sorry for asking. Thank you. Bye." So, so I'm telling that story because it's important for people to know their rights, and it's important for people to request records themselves if they're interested in finding out facts. You can't find out the facts just from talking to somebody who made the public records request and is sharing it with you. If they're sharing the actual document and showing that to you and giving you your own copy, maybe that's fine. But if you're going to do something with it, like say use it on your YouTube channel, you want to have a record of having gotten those records legitimately, because you just don't want there to ever be a question. Like if there could be a question that maybe they were released to you early before they were supposed to be released. So you want to have data to fall back on, like your email history or your texting history or your phone calls or what have you. But on that, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to try to upload this so you guys can see it right away. Fingers crossed. Hopefully by the end of the day, I'll have a lot of the bugs worked out. And then by tomorrow, I should be able to do a live again. So thanks for watching. Drink your water, eat your protein, fruits and veggies. Take really good care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Get your exercise, your fresh air, your sunshine, and just have a great day. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.